Hi everyone, this is Jim. I had a suggestion from one of my viewers that I might take a look at some of the games from the final rounds of the Women's Championship, the U.S. Women's Championship, recently played in St. Louis, and took a look at the games and found there were actually some pretty interesting and exciting games there. So I thought I would present a few of them to you. So let me say thanks for the suggestion, and let's put the first one on the board. So this is a game from round 7. At this point, Anna Zatonsky was in the lead by half a point over Irina Krush. And here she has the black pieces against Alyssa Milahina. And so Alyssa plays e4, and Anna plays e6. We get a French defense. So go through the normal lines. Here we get the advanced variation with e5. And these are all pretty standard moves. c5 responding, c3 defending, knight c6, a typical strategy with the French defense, a counterattack against the center, focusing on the point d4 there. White's defending it, and queen b6 just intensifying the pressure. And now bishop d3, leaving the pawn apparently undefended. So there's an exchange here. And now, of course, well, if you don't know this, I won't say of course, it's a bit of a surprise. You can't take the pawn here because that knight is really just hanging. White can take it, and if black tries to hold on to the knight, black loses the queen. So it's no good. That's a check, and the queen drops. So you can't take the pawn, but the normal move here is bishop to d7, and now the pawn really is hanging. And white here, however, still does not defend the pawn, but castles instead. So this is known as the Milner-Barry gambit. And it's a gambit that's pretty good. Black goes ahead, takes up the challenge. So Anna's fighting for a win, so she grabs the pawn and hopes to hold on. But white gets a lot of compensation, open lines and active pieces. So just no panic. The pawn was given up intentionally, and now you just develop. So bishop to c5 was played, maybe with some ideas of an attack on the f2 pawn later. Knight takes d4, and then knight to f3, trying to prove this bishop is awkwardly placed here on d5. And I was a little bit surprised black didn't retreat, but there's just no great retreat squares. There's really only this square. And the bishop can be kicked around more with the threat of b4 once it sits on the c5 square. So the best move here is just to ignore the, I mean, it's not a threat, but white is going to grab the bishop and get the advantage of the bishop pair. So this is part of the compensation for the gambit, is that white has the bishop pair in addition to some open lines, and there's no real good way to avoid it. So all this is well played up to this point. Rook e1 defending the e-pawn. You don't want to give up a second pawn here, and particularly not this one, which is an advanced pawn and helps keep black's pieces cramped. So, and black in the meantime is going to try and find a way to develop the light squared bishop there. Okay, so b6 was played. b1, maybe advancing the b pawn. I'm going to kind of lightly comment these games because I had a couple games, well, 3 in total I wanted to show, and I don't want the video to get excessively long, so I'm going to kind of keep my comments brief except when we get to key points. So just kicking the queen around with the bishops, making use of piece activity here. g3, another kick. Queen goes back to the other side. b3. So queen drops back to a3. No, it goes forward to a3. Yeah, can't go to a6, of course. Queen e2. Now knight f5. And bishop takes. So trading one advantage for another. White gives up the advantage of the bishop pair, but creates a weak pawn in doubled pawns, and is going to win one of those pawns back. So with this maneuver is going to achieve material equality. Rook D to B. Rook B to D1. Getting dyslexic here. Castles, just giving up the pawn, and there was nothing really better there. Rook takes d5. So material equality has been reestablished, but now white actually has a slightly better pawn structure if this pawn on e5 can be secured. White is in pretty good shape. So black plays bishop c6, trying to now black has some activity with the pieces. Having given the pawn back, there's compensation once again for black to do something. So rook to d4, queen to e7, and bishop d2, bishop a8. Interesting retreating move, but it opens up a line for the rook on the c file. Rook to f4. And I think this is the point. Yeah, move 24, rook f4. So this was a bit of a mistake. There are some potential threats in the position, and rook to f4 doesn't really deal with them. The chess engine here is saying that white really needs to play the move f3 to shut down this diagonal, because the queen from e7, it was kind of doing all this crazy maneuvering over here and over here, but now it's got a very simple idea of just getting in front of that queen and threatening checkmate along this diagonal. And rook f4 doesn't really help address this threat. So this is an inaccuracy, I guess, and now black starts to get an advantage. Let's see, it starts out with the move rook to c2. And the queen went to e3 to cancel that. Queen went to e3 to unpin the bishop. And now rook to d8, attacking the bishop again, so the bishop can move. Bishop to b4. That's what I wanted to point out. In this position, you might think bishop b4 here is a good idea, taking advantage of this skewer, hitting the queen and the rook. But this is where the move queen to b7 comes in. So the queen escapes with a checkmate that forces f3. That's actually the only defense. And then black has time to escape with this rook f to e8. And so this is just fine for black. So that's not a winning move. You might think that's a try for white, but it doesn't work there. So like I said, not bishop b4, but f3 is really the way to play here. But rook f4 was played, and that allowed this rook to become active on the second rank. So rook c2, queen e3, now rook to d8, hitting the bishop. Now bishop to b4, chasing the queen, but the queen can go to e6, and rook back to d4, sort of admitting the mistake. I guess the idea was to put pressure on the f-pawn, but there were enough threats in the position that that wasn't going to work out. And now this rook goes to e8. Pressure on the e-pawn. Now f3, shutting down the diagonal. Queen to c6, setting up this battery that was long threatened, but now it's finally in existence. And rook to f1. Rook takes a2 was played, picking up a pawn. So that sequence has netted black a pawn, and black is doing pretty well in this position. Maybe it's a winning advantage, maybe not quite clear, but definitely black is the one that's pressing now, whereas before white had at least equality and was pushing somewhat. Okay, so rook to d6. Sorry, it's white's move. Rook to d6 was played, hitting the queen. Queen drops back to c8. Rook fd1. h6. Not that one. h6. Queen f4. So a bit of maneuvering, queen c2, and then the queen jumps into the second rank. So the rooks need to stop that. The rook on the 6th rank drops back, and the queen grabs here and picks up another pawn. So at this point, Anna Zatonsky is clearly winning, and being a leader in the tournament, she's got every reason to feel good about her prospects. But the game continues. It's not over yet. Rook to d8. It's white's turn to move. Rook to d8. Okay, exchanging off a pair of rooks, maybe. But bishop to c6 was played, just defending the rook. And now e6, trying to get some activity against the king here. Queen takes e6. Rook takes e8 check. Queen takes was played. Rook to e1, hitting the queen. It's defended by the bishop there. Queen to d7. Bishop c3, aiming at the king. Queen to d5, basically trying to keep black busy with defensive moves and not have time. If black has enough time, these pawns obviously are going to just decide the game in black's favor. So a lot of maneuvering going on. Queen to d5, getting set up on this battery once again. Queen to b8 check. King runs to h7. Queen to f8. Right here. Okay, creeping closer to the king. Okay, this is the next position I wanted to get to. So now it's black's turn to move. So it's Anna Zatonsky with the black pieces. And there is a game-winning tactic here. But on the other hand, it's move 40, which means this is the last move before the time control. So there may have just been seconds on the clock to play this move. And so she probably just whipped out a move that was part of a pre-planned sequence. She played the move queen to c5 check. But there is a winning move for black. So here's a nice little tactics quiz for you. Can you find the quickest way for black to win the game? I think this is within the range of something you might be able to find. Certainly a player of the strength of Anna Zatonsky would expect her to find this in just a few seconds. Okay, if you want time to think about it, pause the video. I'm going to give the answer away. It is rook to g2 check. And I really like these kind of sacrifices. You just give up the whole rook and it's mate in two because queen goes here, and where can the king go? There's two mates. Basically, if the king goes, can't go there. The king goes to g1, then queen g2 is checkmate. But if the king goes to h3, then queen to h5 is checkmate. So two different checkmates, but they're equally effective. So if we back up, that was not entirely forced. There's one other possibility here, which is the king can try and run away from the rook. Let's see. If the king goes to f1, then queen takes f3 as checkmate. So that leaves king to h1 as the stiffest defense. And, of course, you don't really have to see all of this. You just need to know that it's safe to put your rook there, and you play that. And then you get to this point and you figure out, is there a mate? And there is a mate here. So if you want to pause the video again and see if you can find the mate from this position, this one is kind of cute too. There may be more than one. Anyway, I'm going to give the answer away here. So if you want some time to think about it, pause the video. The answer is rook takes g3 check. And once again, if you take the rook, then queen takes f3 here is a mate in two. The king moves, and then it's checkmate wherever the king goes to. So you can't take the rook. So once again, all you really have to see is one move ahead. You can play this move, and there's no way to take the rook. So you picked up a pawn at least. And then there are various defenses white might try. The cute one I like is, how about if he just defends the pawn? This fails pretty quickly to queen there check, rook takes, bishop takes is checkmate because the bishop is checking the king, and the rook, which is still hanging, of course, blocks the king's escape. So it's just two pieces. That's a nice little checkmate. So, and what else can be tried? The engine is giving things like, okay, rook takes g3, sorry. After this, the engine is giving things like queen h8 or queen takes g7 as a way to hold off the mate for a few moves. But basically, there's no escape at this point. So that would have ended the game. Let's back up. And so in this position, queen c5 was played with the check, the king, and forces a trade of queens. That's right. So we get into an endgame, rook and bishop against rook and bishop. And still clearly winning for black, but it's funny. The game goes on. This is all I'm going to show you of this game. I just want to give the final result. The game goes on for a long time, and there's one point after the rooks are traded, and we were left with opposite-colored bishops. And it's even possible that white had some drawing chances in there. I couldn't, in the time available, analyze it out to completion, but But black, Anna was able to maintain her extra pawns and get to this position where white resigned. So that's how the game ended. If you want to play over the whole game, you can find these games at the St. Louis Chess Club website. The next game I wanted to look at is from the 7th round. So, no, that was from the 7th. Next game is from the 8th round. So after Anna won in the 7th round, she was a full point ahead of Irina Krush because Irina drew in the 7th round. So a 1-point lead over the nearest challenger. But in the race, in the next round, in the 8th round, Irina had the white pieces against Anna. So they were able to play each other and go head to head. So this gives Irina a chance to sort of leapfrog or catch up, I guess is the word. She can catch up with Anna by a win in this game. So certainly both players are motivated to do their best. Irina starts off with c4 and Anna replies knight of 6. We get into knight of 3, an English opening. There's a lot of different, after those first few moves, it was still possible to go into a queen's pawn opening or a Nimzo-Indian or a lot of different things, but d5 was played here. Bishop g2. We stay in English opening territory with these moves. c5. And this is a bit of a double-edged move. Turns out this is still in the opening book, but not the most common sequence. But it allows interesting kind of tactical series that happens shortly. So white castles here, knight c6, and d4. So the two pawns in the center, and the fianchetto bishop, a bit like a Catalan setup, but black has put all these pawns forward and is going to start making some exchanges here, so it's not going to be a typical Catalan. So d takes c4 was played, and now queen a4. This initiates the tactical sequence. This appears to be a pawn sack, but things are not so simple. So c takes d4 is played. The first pawn is grabbed. And now knight takes d4. You have to pause and admire this move. This knight is under attack from 2 pieces. Now, of course, the knight is pinned, but the queen can just take the knight. What's wrong with that? Well, it's a bit of a trick question because queen takes d4 was played. Okay. So what is white's excuse for giving up a whole piece? You should be able to spot this one. White's next move is forced. So what does white play here? A very common tactic. I'm going to give it away. Bishop takes c6, and of course, if the bishop is taken, then queen takes c6 is a fork of the rook and the king. So the bishop really can't be taken, and so it wasn't even a piece sacrifice at all. But it was a pawn sack. Black ended up with an extra pawn here, and bishop d7 is played. And now rook to d1, hitting the queen. And there is a line. Actually, queen takes d1 check is a line. It's not especially great, but I just put it on the board to show it to you. Queen takes, basically it's giving up the queen for 2 pieces because after queen takes back, which is forced, you can grab the bishop. And so if you count, white has the queen, and for the queen, black has a rook, a bishop, and a pawn. So roughly equal, but I think most players would prefer white in this position, and the engine likes white a little bit. So instead, just taking the bishop is probably best play, and then queen takes c6 check was played anyway because this queen is still hanging. so the surprises didn't end there. I was completely expecting the queen to just retreat at that point after being attacked by the bishop. Now you go ahead and take the bishop, and then take the queen. Yeah, so queen takes bishop, pawn takes is forced, and then you can take the queen. And now we have material equality again. There's 2 rooks and 2 pieces, and we have 2 rooks and 2 pieces. Black has an extra pawn, but that pawn is just not going to last. So knight d5 was played here. Rook takes c4, and right here, this move is a bit of a mistake. Now this position is still in the opening book and has been seen before, but we're maybe in a position that neither side is particularly familiar with. But king d7 was the move in the opening book that I have here, and it's not a good move because of e4. So this might have been a bit of opening preparation. I don't know to what extent Irina could have known that Anna would have gone down this particular line in the English, but it is a line, it is a known line, so it's possible that this had been prepared. So with e4 kicking the knight around, white gets a pretty good position. So the knight drops back to b6, and the rook drops back to c2, and I guess things have reached kind of a steady state. f5 is played here, but you can see, well, white hasn't developed any of these pieces on the queen side, but black has structural weaknesses, and unless there's a way for black to really exploit this lack of development, it seems like white has good chances in the endgame. So let's go on a few moves. We just yeah, there's a number of moves here that are played that I don't have much comment on. There seemed to be a certain amount of maneuvering going on, but you see that white was able to solve her problems with getting the pieces out. You know, black tried some activity on the king side, but it didn't seem to amount to a whole lot. And you know, none of these moves are actual mistakes. These are all you know, sort of logical consequences. You know, a valid way to play until right here, white seems to start getting some activity with the rooks encroaching on the king side, and so white has gradually, there was some slight edge from the opening, and particularly after king d7, and white has maybe increased her edge a little bit at this point, and black is feeling a little bit tied up in a defensive role, and so black plays the move c4. So you might think, and ends up losing a pawn because this pawn can't be defended. The a pawn can't be defended with the rooks and the bishop on it. So let's just take a brief look here at what would have happened if black had tried to defend the pawn, because I'm sure this was calculated by Anna. Try and figure out if this was the best way to hold the position. I mean, remember, she would be content with a draw as well, because a draw would keep her 1 point ahead of Irina. So mainly she just wants to avoid losing. So, but you hate to play a passive move like this, and white can just gradually increase the pressure. So rook a6, pinning the bishop, and there's not a whole lot for black to do here. Let's say a move like h6. Rook 4 to a5, now threatening to take this pawn, take advantage of the pin, because that pawn is now attacked twice and only defended once. So king to e7, holding on to the pawn, and now the king can start walking in, white's king, king d3, and now the king can't really go forward. You know, the king can go sideways, or the rook could go sideways, and black's king can just march in. And once, I mean, white's king can just march in, and once the king gets to this square, this pawn is falling. So a passive kind of sit and wait strategy doesn't work. So it's very logical here in this position that Anna wanted to try and stir things up a little bit with c4 rather than just wait and get crushed. But this does, that was kind of a pun there, crushed by crush. But rook takes c4 was played. It is a pawn sack. Rook takes c4, pawn takes, rook takes, and white can grab this pawn down here. Cancel that. Didn't play that. Rook takes c4. Oh, king d3 was played first, and then the pawn was grabbed. Okay, and now black pushes the pawns, and this is maybe an endgame that black can hold, but it's certainly difficult with the pawns on both sides of the board, and with a rook and bishop for both sides. There's certainly chances. So let's just go forward a few moves. There's kind of a trade of pawns. White gives up on the a pawn, but wins an h pawn over here after submitting to a bunch of checks. Grabs this pawn, and so we get a situation where there's two pawns against one, where they're not facing each other, and there's still a lot of material on the board with the rooks and the bishops, and should still be winning. Is this still winning for white? Actually, the engine at this point thinks that black might be able to draw this with best play, but it's a difficult position to play, and there's a series of moves here that maybe are not quite the best. That allow white's king to get into the game, maybe starting with this rook a2, king g4, and king d5, and this check, and the king goes forward to f8. And now, once again, the engine is saying there's a definite advantage for white in this position. So somehow in that sequence, I can't say exactly where, black went wrong somewhere. So that's something, if you're interested in in-game play, maybe to check out in more detail. But let's go forward. So now white has an advantage and starts just carefully marching the pawns forward. One of those rules in the in-game is to push the pawns, but you have to always be careful not to push them too fast or too far. And so I think the rule in in-games is make haste slowly. You want to make sure that you can handle all the complications. And there was an exchange of bishops there, and we get into a rook and pawn in-game, which should be winning for white. And the reason I'm showing you the end rather than just narrating it is because there's a cute tactic at the end right here. It's something always to remember when you have a pair of connected pawns that are near queening. They're actually stronger than a rook. So you can give up your rook and still, this is not a drawing move, this is a winning move, because these two pawns together are stronger than that rook, because one of them can become a queen. And it's also because black's king was too far away. So after white gets a queen here, then black resigns. So Irina won this game. And so at the end of the 8th round, we're all tied up. And there's one more game from the 9th round I wanted to look at. This is Anna Zatonsky with the white pieces facing Katerina Nemkova with the black pieces, so from the 9th round. So she knows she's tied up with Irina. Irina has finally caught her in the competition. She wants to win this game, and first of all, in case Irina wins, she needs to win just to stay in the game. And if Irina draws or loses, then she will have the championship. So definitely, she's going all out in this game. D4, knight f6, we get a Nimzo-Indian classical line with the queen coming to c2 and an exchange. And what's interesting about this opening is there's a certain amount of chasing of the queen. But white has a very solid pawn structure, so white didn't allow any of the doubling that occurs in other lines of the Nimzo-Indian. But there's another price to be paid for this line, and happens right here. Oh, maybe in a move or two. Yeah, right there. White loses castling privileges because of the bishop lurking here on a6 was finally exchanged for the bishop on f1. And however you take back, the king is not going to be able to castle after this. So there's a little dance with the queens here, but neither side really wants a draw. They're just doing this maybe to gain a few moves on the clock. And then the game proceeds forward from here. Looks like white is building up some pressure. This is Anna with the white pieces. But the chess engine is not impressed. It thinks this is pretty much dead even. And we're even right up until this point. So this is the other key point I wanted to look at in this game. Right now, Katerina Nemkova, she has the black pieces. Her position is about even, but it's kind of a passive position. She's sitting back here defending these pawns with her heavy pieces. She doesn't have a lot of activity on this diagonal. The knights look impressive here, but they don't seem to be hitting a lot of targets. But I don't know. I think the engine recommends maybe you could take the bishop over here. There are various moves that could be played. She goes for a more radical solution, and the engine does not approve of this at all. c5. It's a pawn sack to start with, but there's no particular compensation for the pawn. Actually, Katerina was playing this with a completely different idea in mind. So before you dismiss this move as being bad just because the chess engine doesn't like it, you have to consider the following sequence. So b takes c5 was played, b takes c5, and d takes c5. So white is just a clear pawn up, and it's a good pass pawn. It's isolated, but there's a lot of force behind it. It's not going to fall anytime soon, and these passed pawns become a strength in the endgame. So definitely black gave up something major, and she wouldn't have done this except that there was a tactic in this position that she had seen and had played right now. Knight here. So this is a fork, of course, of the king and the queen. Oh, I'm sorry. She did it with the other knight, knight d to c3. So there's a fork of the king and the queen, so the knight has to be taken. And now you might think, oh, maybe she's going to grab the rook. But this is no good. This is just giving up 2 knights for a rook. White has an extra piece and has an extra pawn and has 2 pieces for this rook. So White's just winning here. That was not the idea. The idea was to just sacrifice that knight and then play the move queen to b2 check. And this is what Katerina had calculated before playing c4. And now for everybody with a chess engine, there is a way for White to maintain an advantage here. but it's a crazy move that would be very difficult to play in a tournament game. The move is king to d3. This is the only way for White to stay with a winning advantage. And so that's why, I would not criticize that move c5, because you have a good chance that if you can calculate this far, you have a good chance that number one, your opponent is not going to have the nerve to play a move like king d3, and then even if she does, there's a good chance you're going to checkmate that king anyway. So it just happens that in this position there's no checkmate. So for example, if you try with rook d to f8, the king can just grab another piece, marching the king right out into the center of the board while there are queens and rooks still on. Pretty amazing, but it turns out to be okay. f5 check, chasing the king some more, and g5 check, hoping to trap it and mate it. But now White can give back some material. And the king goes all the way over to g5. But Black's pieces are now on the wrong side of the board. Even though White's king is exposed, there's just no mating attack here. So that because of that kind of incredible sequence, this move c5 at the beginning is not technically sound. But of course, Anna didn't want to play that way either. So the natural rook 3 to c2 was played, so bringing the rook in to block it. But now there is a sequence that, and that was necessary. You can't block with the other rook because this rook is hanging. But now there's a sequence that that is just drawing. So it just terminates the game pretty much into an even position, starting with this check, forking the king and the queen, and it can't be taken because this rook is pinned. So king has to move. It doesn't matter too much where it goes. King d2 was played. And then 2 queens are hanging, the queen here and the queen here. This queen is under attack by the knight, and this queen's under attack by rook. So queen takes rook was played. Try and get the most material for the queen. King grabs the queen, and then knight takes. And here's the situation. We have 2 rooks and a knight for Black, and White has 1 rook and 2 pieces. So White is down the exchange, but has an extra pawn. And it turns out that this position is just even. And the game went on for quite a while, but let me see. Yeah, I guess I won't go through the rest of the moves. It's too complicated to give it all. But maybe I'll just show them. You can see there was still a lot of tactics still to be played in this game. But there was never any point when one side had a major advantage. Let me take that back. Actually, there was one point right here. There was one point right here where Black maybe could have played for something a little more. No, I take it back. The chess engine was getting excited for a while there, but after it had more time to think about it, it saw the drawing idea. So nothing happened the rest of the game other than a lot of moves, and nothing happened in terms of either side getting a winning advantage. So we ended up with this position where White, I skipped over a few moves there. White ends up Black ends up sacrificing a knight to stop the pawn. And but of course you can't win with a knight, so that's how the game was drawn. So in the last round, both Anna and Irina drew their games, so we went to the playoffs. Tatev, as I mentioned in my earlier video, Tatev won in the final round, and so it was a 3-way playoff. Tatev managed to defeat Anna Zatonsky in a Armageddon game, and then Tatev Abrahamian and Irina Krush played the playoff, and Irina came out on top. And so that's how it went down in the Women's Championship. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.